Hello and welcome to the FinancialFox, the finance, investment and crypto with a twist. I'm your host, Steffy B. I'm the founder of PR company Cassiopeia Services, and every week I bring to you my favorite conversation with investment experts, market disruptors, mover and shakers, and the coolest project in crypto. So lots is happening in financial market, and digital assets are rising, are completely shaking up the traditional platform. So today I want to bring to you the conversation that I had with Joshua Barraclough, the newly appointed CEO of European Digital Assets Exchange, Bitpanda Pro. So we are going to talk about digital assets investing. And Joshua is coming directly from JP Morgan. So I'm sure that you're going to find this interview very interesting and also to understand what is actually happening in the space. So stay tuned and let's get this started. Joshua, great to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
Okay,
thank you for having me.
Oh, it's really a pleasure. You have just been appointed as the new CEO of Bitpanda Pro. That's quite exciting.
Yeah, really, really exciting. Actually, it's been a whirlwind couple of months. But you know, just loving the job, loving the community, and kind of the people who are kind of working with me. It's been fantastic.
What's the feeling from, coming from JP Morgan to join a digital asset exchange?
Yeah, it's. I mean, first of all, I think I was a bit overwhelmed by the I guess kind of the response and kind of cultural change. So I think, first of all, JP Morgan, great place, but traditionally, like investment banks, it's a very closed community at a community level, but also at an individual like entity level. So like, JP Morgan keeps themselves, like Citi keeps themselves, like Goldman Sachs keeps themselves, like everyone is doing their own thing in almost kind of somewhat secrecy. I think kind of the first thing is, coming to the crypto community and just like everyone, the amount of people who kind of reached out, who, are just so interested in kind of what you're doing, how they can help. And there's a really kind of like different approach in terms of how people think about things. So it's much more, we're all growing the ecosystem together and working together, and there's enough space for everyone. So I think that bit was, first of all, super, super interesting and has been particularly great. And then, I guess when I think about, Bitpanda and kind of what we're doing and actually how we've been operating as well. I mean, it's kind of worlds apart, right? You have, like JP Morgan, the big banks, super successful, juggernauts, like amazing, huge balance sheets, like continue to roll products out. But it's much more on kind of like, longer term horizon, like slow planning. Like there's a much more lengthy approval process in terms of how things are thought about. There's much more risk. And you kind of compare that to, Bitpanda, which is like a scale up, very well funded scale up. So actually we have like the cash and assets to really do a lot, but actually the decision making process, the speed at which we're executing, it's completely, it's worlds apart. I mean, we make a decision, the next day we're doing it. And I've got to say, like, just in terms of like energy and, everything else, it's really been fantastic.
Great. We are going to talk about Bitpanda in a moment, but before I just wanted to understand your thought and insight on how the big banks are actually taking up on new technology and obviously on crypto, because everything is kind of happening, disrupting traditional financial markets. And the big banks are seeing that, and they have to make a move as well. And especially a lot is happening, not only on a centralized level, but also on a decentralized level with DeFi. So can you maybe tell me how the big banks are seeing the space evolving, and how do you see also they are going to change their offering?
Yeah, and I think you also kind of need to take a step back and kind of think a bit about mindset and like some of this stuff as well. So, I think So one of my jobs when I was at JP Morgan was I looked after the fintech team and kind of really was responsible for, okay, like what's our strategy, like digital strategy as a firm, and like how do we kind of partner with big fintechs from an M&A strategic investment perspective, and kind of really accelerate that. I think if I go back in time to how I used to, I guess, kind of the initial conversations I was having with companies when we started that team, they were very much, we're going to disrupt you, we're going to take you out of the market, and here's how it's going to be. And then fast forward a few years later, actually the same companies were coming back to the big banks and saying, hey, we want to work with you. We want to do as much as possible with you, because actually in a lot of spaces, they weren't getting traction. I think the crypto market and the digital asset space is very different, because whereas a lot of these fintech challengers who were looking to compete in the traditional world ended up having to go full circle and partner with the banks, the digital asset space, like crypto space, really kind of started off as much more of a retail first movement. And so, actually you have this huge, native crypto community who are doing amazing things. And actually, the knowledge they built in terms of actually being able to, compete with the very best of the institutional traders, if not better, I think that's actually really changed. It really changes the power dynamic from being one where the banks are, necessarily in a position where they can say, hey, we're in a position to dictate terms on all of this stuff, because actually it's been growing up around it. And I think that's been super interesting. But having said that, I think the way that a lot of the big banks will be looking at this and thinking about this is, they have this huge client base. They have, again, like they're making billions and billions of dollars in terms of like, trading, banking, like, custody and fund services, like commercial banking, corporate banking, like all of these things like bundled together. And the risk for them of making a mistake, or like losing clients' assets, or like falling foul of the regulators, or anything like that, the ramifications for these banks are so much greater that actually, what you'll find a lot of them are doing is saying, okay, actually, there's, first of all, there's limitations on what they can do, but more importantly, they're looking at it from the view of, okay, what's the risk adjusted view on how we approach this? Like, do we want to be first mover in a lot of the space, or do they wait for people to be quite successful in it and really rely on the fact that, when push comes to shove, yes, they can deploy $100 billion, $200 billion, whatever it takes to buy companies that are successful in this space. And that affords them time and allows them to kind of take that step back and kind of really look and think about how they want to approach all of this. So I think that's kind of one piece, which I think, in the next, I would say kind of 2 to 3 years, I would expect with MiCA and, like with other regulatory, changes that will happen, I think you will start to see the big banks being a lot more active in terms of actually how they're approaching this, and a lot more consolidation in the market as a result of that, because I think that does change kind of what they're doing. And, like the reality is, like a lot of them are just, from a regulatory perspective, not even allowed to participate in these markets right now. So, like actually, if you look at, I think what Goldman are doing and others, I think they're trading, contract for differences. I think it's cash settled. I don't think they're allowed to touch any crypto underlying. And again, I think there's, to that extent, it's really kind of prevented them from getting into these markets. And to be honest, you should also look at it from the client side of things as well. I think when you think about the clients coming into this, it's where's the demand, and typically they will also kind of follow the regulation. They'll follow the demand and they'll evolve to that. So look, I think that's great for the crypto community at large. I think there's a great opportunity to kind of really, really kind of like put some miles on the ground now and really kind of build out some great products and services that really kind of position us and allow us to compete with the major banks, when they kind of do look to kind of get into the space.
Exactly. And here I want to talk a bit about Bitpanda Pro. So if you can expand a bit what digital asset exchange means, and how Bitpanda has been positioning itself as an exchange, because really we have got big exchange like that out there, like Coinbase, Binance. They make lots of noise, where Bitpanda has always been like below the radar, but over time it built up a very good client base. is, and also user experience is quite important, as well as regulation compliance. So tell me a bit more about Bitpanda approach and offering.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bitpanda has been super, super successful. I think I'd break it into kind of like really kind of three parts. So you have the brokerage platform, which is the most well known, and that's what has been doing incredibly well in Central Europe. So this is where we have a huge customer base, and that's obviously kind of our trading platform, or kind of our brokerage trading platform, our equities trading, our card payments, our metals trading, and that's kind of all in kind of one wrapper, where you as kind of a retail customer could go on and trade and access all of these things. Then you have our white labeling business, which is where we're actually partnering with a lot of companies right now in order to help them get into crypto and help them get into stuff. So I think you kind of saw recently a big announcement with Lydia, where we're partnering with them to help their 5.5 million customers get into the crypto market. That's kind of white labeling side of things. And then you have obviously Pro, which is, our kind of, I would say, kind of more sophisticated, retail and kind of more institutional side, which is much more on, okay, like actually, how do we offer like very strong liquidity pools, like access to lots of different assets, moving into more complex products. And actually really kind of catering for kind of like high volume, like high ticket transactions where people are trying to kind of do, I guess kind of very, very, very large deals off the back of that. And really kind of looking to across the suite of different needs. I think that's kind of what we're looking to build out. And so myself, again, like very focused on, what are the other products and services we need to offer from an institutional side of things? So we have license applications we have companies we're looking at from an inorganic growth perspective to help us get to market and maybe buy things and do things faster. We're bringing in some amazing people, both on kind of like the trading and sales side, to help kind of really kind of grow again that institutional client base and really with a goal to like, how do we kind of make our flow differentiated, our products differentiated, and kind of do things that kind of really excite people about coming to our products. And that's the goal, across all of these, we want our products to be best in class. We want to excite people about coming to them. And we want to do it with a mindset that, regulation is super important to us. And we want to work with the regulators and do that within Europe as well. And I think this is the other big thing for us. We are European.
Exactly. European exchange. Correct.
And we are European based, if you're a European client, you will know your European counterpart. And I think that's the thing. And so it's things like, launching Euro pairs, so people can trade Euro pairs. It's, and sterling pairs. I think it's like, and again, it's such a big difference. And we're very actively hiring people who are ex-regulators in all of the countries as well. So again, we're having good conversations with all of the major institutions. I think it's really, it's really about building out that kind of really kind of Eurocentric, I guess, kind of experience, which has been good.
Good. So I've got two questions quickly. Are you looking at integrating DeFi at some form of level?
I think we're open like this. We're always looking at opportunities to service our clients' needs better and get products out there that are differentiated. Okay. So there are lots of things that we want to roll out.
Okay. We have time. Yeah. You mentioned about Europe. How do you see the dollar looking like over the next few years? Do you think strengthening, or is actually going to lose power, and we are going to end up with different kind of power structure in terms of currency?
It's a great question. I think it will change. Take LATAM. I think that is a great example. And I think it really, you've got to look at it. It's almost on a country by country basis. You need to look at it for the time being, but I think it will evolve. So, where you have smaller countries right now with, obviously huge inflation, I think we're seeing obviously mass adoption of these central currencies, and El Salvador being a great example of government stepping in and saying, actually, we're going to use Bitcoin, and that's going to become kind of the central kind of sovereign approach to actually how we deal with currencies. I think we maintain and continue to be in a period of high inflation. I think what we're seeing in the US and what we're seeing, in Europe, I don't think it points to any kind of slowdown in that. And so over time, do I see additional strengthening of these assets? For sure. And again, as big institutions come into them, I think it makes it easier. It makes it a bigger case for all of these things. And it also comes back to, when you kind of what we were discussing a little bit at the beginning, when you think about digital asset exchanges more broadly, ultimately, longer term, this becomes a transfer of value across a number of different assets. And so, that could be, real estate, that could be, your car, it could be, it could be equities in a company that's public, it could be equity in a company that's private, it could be NFT, it could be any of these things, right? And so ultimately, in that world where the value transfer becomes so linked and your assets are also linked digitally, I think that opens up a real question in terms of, in terms of sovereign central currencies, what's the kind of the real future behind them, and actually how does that all sit together? So I think it's an interesting long-term problem to think through, for sure.
Okay, right. So we talk about NFTs, we talk about tokenized equities. So obviously this is going to have an impact on the traditional financial markets, because why I should buy a share or in a company listed on a stock exchange where I can get exposure with a tokenized equity on Bitpanda. So can you maybe tell me a bit what's the difference, and how do you see, the old world fighting with the new world, or actually get integrated or die?
Well, it's so interesting. And you're already saying this with equities, because the real difference is, let's take equities markets, right? If you're trading traditional equities markets, there are, it's market hours. It's when the market's open, and it's 5 days a week. We've already moved the equities market to it's 24/7. And actually, if you want to buy into shares, you can buy fractional shares of assets, and you don't need to spend, whatever it is, I'm probably getting this wrong, £1,700 for your one Amazon share. You can buy it for a lot less than that. I'm sure Amazon's probably trading more than £1,700 now, but let's see. And I think that's really moved the market on that side. And I think, to the extent that continues, that's only going to change it. But you're absolutely right. When you think about tokenization of assets more generally, I think it opens up such an interesting space. Take private companies, for example, and really what I would think about is it's an efficiency issue. So, if you take private companies, for example, if there's a big, very active secondary market. So you could be, you could hold shares in, SpaceX, which isn't public, and that could be traded with someone who wants to buy your shares in SpaceX. Now, actually, what happens is you have brokers who are dealing with these transactions, and a lot of the time these transactions don't go through because they're actually very complicated and they get blocked by the board, or there's a number of reasons why they might actually get passed. So I think it's something around 10% of these transactions are only ever filled. And there's a lot of time that goes into that, and you have to pay all these legal fees. And again, it's really open for institutional investors, which isn't particularly great, or accredited investors. And so I think kind of what tokenization brings to that is, okay, you could take someone's cap table and you could digitize part of their cap table, and you could say, actually, we're going to play around with some of the shareholder covenants, but ultimately I just want to be able to track the value of the underlying asset, and I want to be able to sell and trade that. Now, if you could do something like that, you could take something that takes a very long time to something that becomes a very instantaneous value transfer. And again, I think there's a huge premium on that. I suspect that becomes even more valuable than the current underlying asset, because it provides the liquidity and allows people to trade in and out of it. And I think that also creates a huge amount of efficiency. It takes out a lot of, I guess, kind of wasted time and effort. And if you can do that, and you can do that in a lot of different assets, I think that becomes a game changer. And we talk about in the traditional world, all these things like T plus, 1, T plus 2, and all these kind of convoluted settlement times. But I think in a world where you, again, are kind of have a very clear ownership structure, you have a very clear and undisputable setup in terms of actually where that asset sits and how it is transferred. I think it becomes a very a very good way of revolutionizing, a very kind of slow and often kind of opaque business.
So I think this is basically one of the major opportunity that you see at Bitpanda is actually fractionalized stocks and ETFs, but also trading tokenized commodities, right? And that's great. But then you have got also the crypto aspect, and you have got different crypto assets listed on the exchange. What's the ratio behind choosing one asset rather than the other one?
It's a great question in terms of, and I think, I'd almost go, I'll give you kind of an example backwards, right? Which is, if you think about the very wealthy individuals in the world who will go through a private bank, typically you have a private banker who is advising you and saying, you have a portfolio of assets and you should be putting your assets into lots of different things, because ultimately, there's generating returns, and there's also kind of, factoring in risk, and there's obviously kind of looking at what's going to happen in the market. So like broadly speaking, if you're a traditional, private banker, you're probably looking for a, good allocation in equities, good allocation in private companies via funds or directly, some allocation in bonds, and maybe some allocation in like real estate as well, as you kind of like look at this stuff. And again, taking that risk adjusted view in terms of actually where you're actually looking to put a lot of this stuff. I think, like, to be honest, where it becomes really exciting from our perspective is to the extent that, we can offer much more of that, diversified portfolio, such that actually you get the same opportunities as a lot of these other places. And I think, from my perspective, where I cover the big institutions, it's how do I make that more seamless for the institutions who are used to some of these more traditional assets, and how do I, help them with the traditional assets and bridge the gap between crypto and vice versa. I think if you kind of look at it on the kind of the brokerage side and what we're doing there, it's how do you kind of create much more of a balanced investing model where people can have that level of allocation and kind of thought process in terms of being able to access a lot of these assets that they otherwise may not have been able to.
Exactly. But question is, are you considering at some point to kind of offer strategies? Yeah,
I understand. So more of an advisory side on that. Again, without saying, my area of expertise is what we're doing on the pro side, so more on the institutional and sophisticated retail side. On the brokerage side, without kind of saying too much, I think the market is heading towards, more structure and more advice around these things. I think there's obviously complications around doing that. I think it goes without saying that the better you want your service to be, the better your product needs to be, and kind of the better interactions and more positive interactions you can give to your clients. So I'd say with that, I think there's inevitably, you will see companies like ours moving in that direction.
Okay, very interesting. Now, last question, just for a question of transparency. Explain me a little bit about your revenue model and how actually Bitpanda Pro makes money.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, like we charge right now, we charge very low fees. It's really, for us, it's a flow game. So what we're looking for is we are looking to generate lots and lots and lots of volume from lots of market participants. So whether it's like sophisticated retail, whether it's asset managers, hedge funds, market makers, like anyone, what we're doing is we're looking to help people trade as many pairs as they can and access as much volume as they can without losing pricing or kind of seeing any slippage on that. And in exchange, we do that on very low fees. And again, because we're targeting very high volumes, we can do that on a very low fee basis.
Fantastic. So basically, if you have to give a message to investors why they should join Bitpanda Pro, will that just be about the fee, or do you have anything else that you would like to say?
Yeah, I would say there's the fee side, there's the volume side. I would say the other part is obviously we are radically transforming our product suite as well. So we're going to be rolling out some very good exclusive offers and
give
new
us some
things.
hints.
I ask me again in January, and I'll be able to tell you a lot more. And I think things that will be unique to the market in terms of some of the stuff we're doing. So I would say, like, right now, if you want to trade volume, you want to do it at a low price, I would say come to us, and we are massively ramping up our volume on the exchange at the moment. So I think it's really exciting. And then in the near term, we will have many announcements. In fact, it's going to be a big year of announcements on things we're doing. So unfortunately, my lips are sealed, and we should do this again, and you can do like here's what you said now, and in 6 months' time, here's all the things that we've done. But it's very exciting.
I'm sure we will have the opportunity to follow up. I see your excitement, which already says a lot. And as you said, there are big opportunities out there. And I'm really excited to see what is happening. So anybody interested? Where should I go? How should I sign up?
Yeah. If you go to, type in Bitpanda Pro or go into your browser, type in exchange.bitpanda.com. You will end up with us. We're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. So, we kind of post a lot in terms of market trends, what's happening, and obviously any announcements that we're making will be there first. So yes.
Okay.
Come and sign up.
Thank you, Joshua. It was great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Right. Lots is happening in the financial market space. Obviously, due to new technology, due to crypto, and surely in the next few months, in the next years, we are going to see the space very different from what is today. So stay tuned. And if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel and podcast, click the subscribe button and follow us on social media to stay up to date with our news and interviews. And I will see you next time.